Some of you have been asked to find the perimeter of two rectangles, such as this, and it has fractions in it. And you may have been asked 4 questions, such as what is the perimeter of the quilt? Because the inner part is a quilt and the outer part is a frame in this problem. And the first questions are what is the perimeter of the quilt? That's the distance all the way around. And what is the width of the frame? That would be the distance all the way across here. And then you might be also asked what's the height? That's this distance here. And what is the total perimeter of the frame? That would be the distance all the way around. In a prior video, I have answered the first 2 questions in detail. If you missed that video, you may want to start there. I've linked it up here, and that is a great place to start. But we're going to go into the next part where we're going to answer the second 2 questions. And I'm Professor Capko, if you don't know me, and I'm going to make this super easy for you so you can solve this correctly every time. But first, I want to say something wonderful is going to happen to you very soon. So keep your eye out for it. And now back to the video. As I said, in the first video, we solved the first 2 parts with fractions. And in this one, we're going to find the second 2 questions, the answers. So the next one is what is the total height? So we're going from the bottom here all the way to the top of the frame. And we're given several different pieces of information with fractions, like the distance from the bottom of the frame to the bottom of the quilt is 3 1/3 feet. And then the quilt itself is 5 3/4 feet tall. And then from the top of the quilt to the top of the frame is another 3 1/3 feet. Luckily, the bottom and the top are equal, so this is centered vertically. So let's see how we can figure this out. So number 3, we're finding the height of the frame. And this is going to just require us to add some fractions. And so let's start with from the top here. We're going to add this distance to this distance to this distance. And it would be super easy if there weren't fractions. So I'm going to show you how to do it with fractions. The first distance is 3 1/3 feet. That's that distance. And we're going to add to it this distance here, which we're told is 5 3/4 feet. And we're going to add this last distance, the 3 1/3 feet. And that's going to be equal to the height, which I'll just abbreviate as h. So we're going to add those 3 up. Now, since this and this are the same, I'm just going to say 2 times it, right? If you add 2 things together, it's the same thing as multiplying by 2. So I'm going to rewrite this, same problem, as 2 times 3 1/3. And I'm going to drop the units for right now because each and every item here is the same unit. So we're going to just know that it's feet, and just to save room and to make it a little less messy, I'm going to drop the units. So this is this part and this part being added together, and we're doing it by multiplying. And I'm going to add to it 5 3/4 feet, and that's going to equal to the height. So far, so good? All right, if you're finding this kind of material helpful, I really appreciate those of you who are giving it a thumbs up. That really helps me out, and it helps other students because it'll make it so they can find these. In the last video, what I did was I converted this inner part here from a mixed number, which is a whole number with a fraction, into an improper fraction, is one which is the numerator is greater than the denominator. So I did that by rewriting it here, 3 1/3. And I take the whole number and I multiply it by the denominator. 3 times 3 is 9, and then I add the top number, the numerator. So 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1 is 10. So it's 10/3 is my improper fraction. So let's rewrite this here. 2 times 10/3 plus 5 3/4 is equal to the height. So I've rewritten it with an improper fraction. Now we can multiply. When we multiply, we don't need a common denominator. And we're going to imagine this is a 2 over 1, just because 2 over 1 is the same thing as 2, and we just multiply straight across. 2 times 10 is 20, and 1 times 3, of course, is 3. So 20 over 3 is what that turns out to be. And then we're going to add to it 5 3/4 feet, and that is equal to the height. Now again, to make this a little clearer and a little simpler, I think, I'm going to convert this mixed number into a improper fraction, just as I did over here. So I'm going to rewrite it 5 3/4, and I'm going to take the 5, which is the whole number, and multiply it by the denominator. 5 times 4 is 20, and then I add the numerator, which is 3. So 5 times 4 is 20, plus 3 is 23, and we have the same denominator. So I can rewrite this as 20 thirds plus 23 fourths is equal to the height. And again, I can't add these, and why is that? Put it down in the comments if you know. That's right. When we add, we have to have a common denominator, and neither of these are the same. So we need to find a common denominator for them both. And again, I like to write them stacked. It's just easier to look at them and to find that common denominator. 23 over 4. So I just took this number and I wrote it here, and I took this number, I wrote it here. You could do it over here as well. Just the way my mind works, it's just easier to find. So what's the common denominator between 3 and 4? And if you don't know, the easiest way is just multiply them. That's not the only way, because sometimes there's a smaller number that you could use as a common denominator. But in this case, 3 times 4 is appropriate. 3 times 4 is 12. So that's the new common denominator we're going to shoot for. How do I turn a 3 into a 12? Well, 3 times 4. And if I multiply the denominator by 4, I gotta multiply the numerator by 4. Likewise, for the denominator, for the second one, to turn the 4 into 12, I need to multiply it by a 3. 3 times 4 is 12. And if I do that to the denominator, I'm going to do it to the numerator. Okay, so now we just need to multiply across. We've already done the bottom, so we have 4 times 20 is 80. And then we might want to use a calculator for the bottom one. We don't have to, but let's do it. 23 times 3 is equal to 69. So we've now turned these into some improper fractions with a common denominator. So I'm going to rewrite the 20 over 3, as we recall, is this one. That becomes 80 over 12. And we're going to add it to the 23 over 4 became 69 over 12. Now we have a common denominator, and we can add straight across. The denominator doesn't change, so that stays 12. And the top, we've got 69, and we're going to add to it 80. That's 149, and we know it's still feet. But I'm guessing your instructor might not want it as a improper fraction like this, so we need to turn it back into a mixed number. And as I did in the last video, the way we do it is we take the denominator and we divide it into the numerator, and let's use old school division because that's the best way to do it. So I'm going to take the 12, I'm going to divide it into 149. 12 goes into 14 one time. So 1 times 12 is 12. Subtract it from the 14 is 2. And bring down the 9, right? Bring that straight down. So now I've got a 29. 12 goes into 29. Well, 1 time's enough. 2 times, 3 times 12 is too much. So we're going to go with 2 times 12. So 2 times 12 is 24. Subtract that. 29 minus 24 is 5. That's our remainder. How do we rewrite that as a mixed number? We remember this part up here is our whole number, so it's 12. The remainder is going to be our numerator, and our denominator is what we divided by, that original denominator. It's going to be 12 and 5/12 feet. That is our height of the frame. So we can write that in as our answer to number 3 is 12 and 5/12 feet. And one last question. Number 4. Number 4 is asking us to find the total perimeter of the whole frame. So we're going to go all the way around our frame, all the way around, like one piece of string. How long is that piece of string? Well, we have some information that we didn't have before. We now know the height is 12 and 5/12 feet, right? Because we found that. And in the prior video, we found that the width of the frame is 6 and 1/20 feet. So that's a good start there. So all we need to do now is, as we did before, we're going to add up all the sides. All the sides are going to add up. So number 4 of frame. And we know that the perimeter of the frame is going to be the height plus the height, both sides, right? Plus the width is equal to the perimeter, right? We're adding this side and this side and this and this, and that's how we wind up with the perimeter. Since I've got h plus h, I can rewrite that as 2h. And since I got width plus width, I can add that as 2w is equal to the perimeter. So far, so good. And we know that the height is equal to 12 and 5/12 feet. And we know that the width is equal to 6 and 1/20 feet. So we can write that in. 2 times the height, 12 and 5/12, plus 2 times the width, 6 and 1/20 is equal to the perimeter. Now, before I do this multiplication again, I like to turn it into an improper fraction. And one thing we can do, we can go back through the same process, but if you recall, our work earlier had given us an improper fraction for the height of the frame. This was the height of the frame. And because we write everything down and we show all our work, we can see that we already have the improper fraction, so we don't have to reverse what we already did. We can just write this as 2 times 149 over 12. Likewise, we could do 2 times, and instead of recalculating this, let's go back to our work, and this was in the prior video. So our prior video showed us that the width of the frame as an improper fraction was 121 over 20. 121 over 20. So that is, again, another advantage to writing all your work out every step of the way. Also, in case you make a mistake, it's easier to find your mistake. And this is all equal to the perimeter. So let's do our multiplication. All right. Again, we can imagine that these 2's are over 1. We don't need a common denominator to multiply. So we're going to multiply. And I've got 149 times 2 is equal to 298 over 12 plus, and then I'm going to multiply here, and this is going to be over 20 because the denominator is 1 times the denominator, and I'm going to clear this, and I've got 121 times 2. 2 times 121 is equal to 242. That's our perimeter. Now again, we don't have a common denominator, so we can't just simply add these, can we? So we're going to need to find a common denominator for them. So to do that, I like to stack them. 298 over 12, and we have 242 over 20. And what is a good common denominator? Not equal. We're going to multiply by something, and that's going to equal our common denominator. What would be a good common denominator? Well, of course, we could always just multiply them by each other, and we get this large number. I only do that. I did that in the two prior ones because I knew there was no shorter or no smaller common denominator. But in this case, I look at it and I know that there's a common denominator that we can use. What's a good one? If you know, put it in the comments. That's right, 60. 12 goes into 60 evenly and 20 goes into 60 evenly. So we're going to aim for 60 as our common denominator. What do I need to multiply 12 by to get 60? Correct, 5. So I'm going to multiply 12 by 5 is 60. And if I do it to the denominator, I've got to do it to the numerator. And likewise down here, 20 times what is 60? That's right, 20 times 3. So if I multiply the denominator by 3, I've got to multiply the numerator by 3. So let's do that multiplication. So on the top, over here, I've got 298, and I'm going to multiply it by 5, and that gets me a pretty large number, 1490 over 60. And on the bottom here, I've got 242 times 3, and that gives me 726. Now, of course, you might have to do these by hand if you're not allowed to use a calculator, but I'm just doing this to save time on the video. So we're going to rewrite the 298 over 12, and that became 1,490 over 60. And don't be intimidated by these large numbers. They handle just the same as the smaller numbers. And the 242 over 20, we know became 726 over 60. All we've done is taken our pizza and we sliced it up into smaller pieces. It's the same size pizza. We just sliced it in smaller pieces. That's our perimeter. We do have a common denominator, so we can now add. So we know our common denominator stays the same, 60. It's going to equal to the perimeter, and I have 1490, and I'm going to add to it 726, and that gives me 2,216 all over 60. So we have 2,216 over 60 feet is equal to our perimeter. Again, we don't want to leave it probably as an improper fraction. We're going to turn it into a mixed number, and our tried and true processes are going to take the 60. We're going to divide it into 2216. All right, so 60 won't go into 22, so how many times will 60 go into 221? Well, again, you might want to use a calculator if you can't do that in your head, so we're going to divide it by 60, and that tells us it can go in 3 times. 3 times. I'm going to ignore the decimal afterwards. So we just want the whole number, 3 times 60, and we know 3 times 0 is 0, and 3 times 6 is 100 is 18. So we have 180, right? So if we have 180, we're going to subtract that from the 221. 221 minus 180. So just to save time, 221 minus 180 gives us 41. We've got one more digit to bring down. That's that 6. How many times does 60 go into 416? Well, let's use the calculator, 416, and we're going to divide it by 60, and that gives us 6. I'm going to ignore everything past that. So we've got 6, and so let's multiply that out. 6 times 0 is 0. 6 times 6 is 36. We've got 416, and I'm going to minus 360 from it, and that gives me 56. 56 is our remainder because there's nothing else we can do with it. That's our remainder. And this is our whole number. So we've got 36 as our whole number. Our remainder goes on top, right? The numerator, 56, and our denominator stays the same, 60. So it's 36 and 56/60 feet is the perimeter all the way around. So let's go ahead and write that down as our final answer. And that is 36 and 56/60 feet. And that is how you answer this question. That's all I have for you in this video. Hopefully you found this helpful. And if you want to see more types of things like this and you want to go into more in depth and support this channel, you can join one of the memberships I've got listed down below. You can hit the join button. It's right next to the subscribe button. And while you're down there, hit the subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thank you.